You want a war? You're gonna get one.
Forget the lies, the money. We're in this together and through it all. They said that nothing's forever, and they refuse to see the change in me. Why won't they wake up? Come on, come on, come on. Let's get it out. Move to the music, play that fucking music. Live through my music, yeah.
Hey yo, Reliving the War, episode 197, the 16th of August, 1999. This week we've got Raw coming from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, while Nitro takes place in Colorado Springs. We had a great episode of Nitro last week, followed by a terrible WCW pay-per-view. Road Wild 99 was not a good show, and it was pretty painful watching World Championship Wrestling flush away that momentum and goodwill they built up over the past week, but let's see how they get on this week. My expectations are very, very low. Over on the WWF side, SmackDown's going to make its official debut on UPN on August 26th as a weekly television show. I've already covered the pilot episode from April, and I will be covering the full proper debut episode after next week's episode of Reliving the War. If you want to see SummerSlam, Reliving the War 198 and the SmackDown debut early, then head over to my Patreon and see what's available. I'm usually at least 1 week ahead on Reliving the War videos and a few weeks ahead on everything else. The Jam goes international this week with our man Darko. Darko's from Serbia. He attended a recent WWE live event in Vienna, and getting to a WWE show was always a dream for Darko, so he ticked off a bucket list item by attending this event. Awesome stuff, man, and thank you for sending in your photo. Okay guys, I hope you like Sid Vicious because the big man's all over our number one of Nitro. Let's get started. The commentators talk about the Road Wild main event and the fact that Kevin Nash has now retired. They also talk about Sid dominating Sting last night at the pay-per-view, and Shivani says the world should now be paying Sid a lot of attention. Tony also said Sid has a 55-0 win streak in WCW, which is absolutely 100% incorrect, and you don't even need to look up match records to know this is wrong, but here, I'll humour you. He's only had about 14 or 15 matches on Nitro, Thunder and pay-per-view, and as mentioned in the Road Wild video, he's also lost matches via disqualification on TV. If you're thinking about house shows, then forget about it. He's lost every house show match he's had against guys like Booker T and Sting. He's only had 20 matches since returning to WCW, so how can he have a 55-0 win streak? This company, dude, swear to God. Shivani tries to correct this by saying it's single matches only, but this is also obviously wrong. The Nitro opener featured Lash LeRoux taking on Juventud Guerrera, and the big man himself came down to dish out a few choke slams and a few power bombs. He then said the name Sid Vicious would be heard the loudest in the year 2000, and he also said he's on a mission to accumulate the most wins ever in professional wrestling. Yeah, okay, big man. Sid calls out Hulk Hogan. He says he's going to continue disrupting matches until Hogan gives him a title shot. And yeah, Sid lived up to his word by interrupting the next match too. It was Steve Regal versus Scotty Riggs. More choke slams, more power bombs, and Sid said he wants Hogan to give him what's rightfully his, while also saying he's going to beat Goldberg's undefeated streak. Ernest Miller and Mike Enos were able to have a match without interruption, but Sonny Ono still got involved and he ultimately cost Mike Enos the match. Sonny went up for a gorilla press slam, but Miller kicked the back of Mike's head, and the Cat wins an absolute filler match on Monday Nitro. Backstage, Sid powerbombs La Parka on some lovely soft popcorn. Lenny Lane then competed in his best match to date when he took on Rey Mysterio Jr., but it's a match that didn't get finished because, you guessed it, Sid Vicious ran down to once again attack the competitors. Makes you wonder why Ernest Miller and Mike Enos got a free pass, but anyway, Sting runs down this time to stop Sid ruining all these matches, and when Hulk Hogan shows up, Sid gets out of the ring. Hogan gets another great crowd response here and he makes it official. Sid vs Hogan will take place on Nitro tonight. I thought Dusty Rhodes was the only man who could make title matches, but does that really fucking matter? What's maybe more interesting though is Hulk promising to give Sting a title shot on Nitro next week. WCW goes back to Las Vegas for their Monday night TV show, and because Sting's had Hogan's back these past few weeks, the Hulkster wants to reward him with a title opportunity. Sting agrees to the match, so Hogan says he's going to train say his prayers, and kick both Sid and Sting's asses over these next few episodes of Monday Nitro. Triple H is going to kick off Raw this week with a promo. On Nitro, the ICP take on the Public Enemy. So Triple H lost his title opportunity at SummerSlam. Chyna is now in that main event against Stone Cold Steve Austin. Hunter says he's not out here to complain, and instead he wants to put all the focus on the woman who's going to make history this week on pay-per-view, and that woman is of course the 9th wonder of the world. Chyna comes out. Hunter says it's an honour to stand with her in the ring tonight, and Triple H then begins reminiscing about all the good times he and Chyna had over the years and the journey they took to get to this very point. It's made pretty clear right here that Hunter and Chyna are a couple when Triple H talks about filling up their limousine with flowers after Chyna qualified for the Royal Rumble and buying her a diamond ring after making it to the King of the Ring semi-final. But the point Hunter's trying to make is that their relationship is all about giving and receiving. Triple H has never asked Chyna for anything, he's been real good to her, but Hunter is going to ask Chyna for something tonight on Raw, and that's the opportunity to wrestle for the WWF Championship. Triple H wants a match against Chyna. The winner of that match will go on to SummerSlam to face Austin. Chyna thinks about it for a moment before saying no, and that's when Hunter snaps. Triple H says he made Chyna and he can just as quickly break Chyna if he really wanted to. She's basically biting the hand that feeds right now, and in Triple H's mind, she's screwing Hunter over. Triple H calls his girlfriend an ungrateful bitch, and this is enough to make her agree to the match. Chyna says Hunter doesn't have the balls to beat Chyna tonight on Raw, so the match is made official and we're going to see Triple H versus Chyna during the first hour of Raw. Things are going to get messy, folks, so strap yourselves in. You know, Public Enemy versus ICP on Nitro actually doesn't sound too bad. These guys certainly don't pretend to be technical wizards, so I'm kinda digging the unpredictability of this one. At least I was until I saw this atomic drop spot from Public Enemy. The Deadpool have a meeting on the outside before we resume with Johnny Grunge hitting a low dropkick on Shaggy 2-Dope. The Public Enemy followed this up with a double elbow drop. Violent J comes in and he doesn't have much luck either, so Vampiro lends a hand on the outside. Yeah, I really shouldn't have got my hopes up here. This has been pretty awful and it doesn't get any better when the match resumes in the ring. We do get to see Shaggy 2-Dope perform an inside out bump though, and this double flapjack on Violent J looked pretty rough. Public Enemy then decide to put Shaggy 2-Dope through a table, and it looks like the clown was legitimately broken in half. A referee bump lets Vampiro pull off a top rope spinning wheel kick, and he follows this up with a nail in the coffin. The ICP win this tag team match, and yeah, these two guys definitely need the right opponents. Again, fair dues for taking bumps. In particular, Mr. 2-Dope took quite a beating here, but the match just wasn't good. On Raw, Al Snow had a match against Road Dogg. Snow brought Little Pepper down to the ring and Jerry Lawler finally got to touch a puppy. This quick match ended when Jimmy Cortez took a dancey punch and Big Boss Man interfered. Bubba hit both Snow and Road Dogg with his nightstick, but rather conveniently, Road Dogg fell on top of Al for a pinfall victory. We then see Chris Jericho backstage, and after putting over his sick hairdo, he says he wants to know where the stage is. Y2J's people are waiting for him. Next we have an Undertaker and Big Show promo, while over on Nitro we've got more promos from Harlem Heat and the NWO. Right, this Undertaker bit, it's quite infamous, and for those who've never heard it before, well, here you go. Here's the Undertaker spewing some absolute horseshit. To set it up a bit, Big Show and Undertaker are getting a tag team championship opportunity at SummerSlam, and the Undertaker wanted to make sure Big Show was ready for this upcoming match on pay-per-view.
And to make sure that my man was right, this week I put him to the test. I had Paul Bearer call out to California, San Fernando Valley, to some associates of ours at the local 81. Paul said, we're gonna need 2 bikes for a ride into the desert. The guy said, Brother Paul, now we know the dead man can handle it, but I don't know about the Big Show. It's August, it's 120 degrees in the middle of Death Valley. He says the only thing that survives in Death Valley are the cold-blooded, the snakes and the lizards. Paul said, that's all right. And in one of those bikes that you're setting up for us, I want the Big Show only to have enough gas to get to the middle of the desert and not get back.
What?
So we're on our way. We get to the middle of Death Valley, 120 degrees. The Big Show's bike runs out of gas, and I pull up next to him, and I ask him this question. It's 120 degrees. How are you gonna survive? He looks me straight in the eyes. Without a hesitation, he says, I'm gonna wait till you go to sleep. I'm gonna stab you in the back. I'm gonna cut your flesh off, make a coat out of it, and I will eat your flesh until I find food.
Ugh.
I said, good answer, big man, but I don't sleep. And I drove off and left him.
What?
I waited on the outskirts of the desert. 2 days later, he comes walking out with a snake necktie and lizard boots, carrying his Harley Davidson on his shoulder. The point of the story is this. What used to be known as Summerslam will now be known as Armageddon, and whoever shows up will be hurt.
It was pretty painful, wasn't it? The lack of crowd reaction said it all really, and Undertaker, being the veteran that he is, knew that the promo didn't go down well. The Y2J countdown begins on the screen, and things go from bad to worse when Jericho comes out to tell The Undertaker that his promo made people drift off into their own little worlds, and fans around the world started switching the channel. You see, in the wacky world of pro wrestling, a newcomer showing up and saying this kind of stuff to a veteran is a bit of a no-no. But it's made so much worse here because the promo actually was incredibly boring, and as mentioned, The Undertaker must have known it was bad. Jericho says The Undertaker isn't the personification of evil, he's the personification of boredom. Raw is Snore is dead and buried, long live Raw is Jericho. Chris called Show and Undertaker morons, he calls them idiots, and The Undertaker says he doesn't know who Jericho is. The dead man's had more shower time than Chris has had ring time, and if Jericho ever interrupts him again, The Undertaker promises it'll be the last time Chris interrupts anybody. Jericho got a ton of backstage heat for this, and it took a long time before that heat went away. Here's what Chris Jericho had to say about this promo in his second book. He knew it was boring, the crowd knew it was boring, Vince knew it was boring, Funaki knew it was boring. So when I came out and called him on it, I made things even worse because I was kicking him when he was down. Taker responded to my claims by saying that he had more shower time than I had ring time. At first I thought he was bragging about his personal hygiene, maybe he was a clean and freshly scrubbed dead man, until I figured out he was really saying I was wet behind the ears and should know my role and shut the fuck up. Backstage afterwards, I walked past Shawn Michaels, who glared at me incredulously and offered the following advice. The next time you cut a promo, maybe you want to avoid calling the biggest star in the company and the leader of the locker room boring. It was a friendly warning from HBK to watch my mouth. I told Taker before the promo that I was going to stick it to him, and he told me to go for it. However, I crossed the line and insulted him by saying what I said. I can't believe the lack of respect I showed him and so many of the other guys in the locker room during my first month in the company, especially since I knew how important the hierarchy of the business was, and still is. Over on Nitro, Booker T says it's been a long 2 years, but Harlem Heat are back together, and Booker also wants to thank DDP for inadvertently making the Heat 8-time WCW Tag Team Champions. Stevie Ray calls the NWO fruit booties who couldn't get the job done. If you fight with Booker, you fight with Stevie Ray too, because these guys are brothers. There's a lot of guys in the back who think they have what it takes to become Tag Team Champions, and Booker T says Harlem Heat welcome all challengers. After a commercial break, we've got the NWO coming out to cut a promo.
Me and the other NWO compadres were sitting in the back.
I'm sorry, come again?
Me and the other NWO compadres were sitting in the back.
The boys took a poop together and they couldn't believe what Stevie Ray just said about the NWO. Scott Norton says Stevie can't just join and leave the NWO whenever he wants, and Brian Adams decides to snatch the microphone to challenge Harlem Heat to a tag team match. This isn't received very well by his teammates, so Norton, Vincent and Horace decide to beat up the former biker Michael Liker, and that leaves us with 3 NWO members, I guess. We began with Hall, Nash and Hogan, now we have got Horace, Vincent and Scott Norton. Kinda funny how Vincent would end up being one of the longest serving and most loyal members the NWO ever had. The Triple H vs Chyna match is up next on Raw. On Nitro, Billy Kidman takes on Diamond Dallas Page. Before the Raw match, we see Chris Jericho telling Hardfinkel that the Y2J plan's all about saving people's jobs, and the Fink is in total agreement with Chris. Looks like a new friendship's gonna blossom before our very eyes. The competitors make their way to the ring. Chyna shows no mercy with a ton of forearms and a few kicks in the corner. Triple H replies with a back elbow, but Chyna then counters a back suplex into a DDT, and we go right back to the corner for some knife-edge chops. Triple H pulls off his facebreaker knee smash, and he too shows no mercy when wrecking Chyna in the corner. He tries to end it with a Harley Race knee, but Chyna kicks out before dumping Hunter out of the ring. A name we haven't seen in quite some time then shows up to attack Triple H. It's Mick Foley. Remember, it was Hunter who injured Mick with his sledgehammer about 3 months ago. Foley hits Triple H with the ring steps while Earl Hebner's busy with Chyna. Chyna covers Hunter, and Chyna wins the match, meaning she's still #1 contender for the WWF title. Mankind then chases Hunter away from the ring before returning to have a few words with Chyna. He says there's always been a vague sexual tension between the two before announcing that he too wants to get involved in the Summerslam main event. This is really starting to go off the rails right about now. Mankind wants Chyna to give her a match tonight for the #1 contendership, and she answers this question with a low blow. Chyna rightfully refuses to give Mick an opportunity, but when she heads back up the ramp, HBK shows up to pretty much screw her over. Sean knows how dangerous Chyna is, but he also has a soft spot for Mick Foley. Sounds like favoritism to me, pal. So Chyna gets forced into another #1 contender match tonight on Raw, and this is a bit ridiculous, isn't it? Chyna's pinned Triple H twice, she's already proven herself, and she's almost on the verge of becoming a sympathetic babyface here because her treatment right now is just not fair. On Nitro, Billy Kidman gets interviewed before his match against DDP, and he confirms that yes, he, Conan, Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio are a new clique in pro wrestling, and that clique's known as the Filthy Animals. Kidman makes generations of wrestling fans cringe when he says the Animals love to party and chase the chicks. Not joking, he actually said that. And he also admits to watching the Nitro Girls pay-per-view more times than Mean Gene Okerlund, over 17 times. Kidman's favourite Nitro girl is Kimberly Page, and when DDP hears this, he walks down to the ring to smack the shit out of this little pervert. Kidman was just saying about how much he respects DDP and Kimberly, but Page doesn't want to hear it. Check out this smooth tilt-a-whirl sidewalk slam from Dallas, very nice, and throughout the whole match, Kidman only gets in one offensive move as DDP wrecks our guy just for saying his wife's pretty good looking. DDP must be mad because he somehow manages to powerbomb Kidman. Not many people can say they've done that. But when Dallas tries to end it with a diamond cutter from a fireman's carry position, Kidman manages to counter and Dallas gets pinned. DDP can't believe it. He attacks Kidman and the referee after the bell. We even see a new version of the diamond cutter right here as DDP looks to destroy young Billy. And to teach this punk kid a lesson, Page begins whipping Kidman with the referee's belt. Kimberly then shows up, and I don't know if this is going to help Billy out or not. She comes into close proximity to reason with Dallas, and Billy has to use all his willpower to stop himself from saying Kimberly looks really hot right now. But he fights the urge and Dallas ends up leaving with his wife. Test vs Steve Blackman on Raw, Disco Inferno vs Chris Benoit on Nitro. It's announced on Raw that Shane McMahon's going to face Test at SummerSlam. If Test wins, Shane has to back off and leave the happy couple alone. If Shane wins, Test will not be allowed any contact whatsoever with Little Miss McMahon. One major problem though, Test isn't going to make it to SummerSlam because he's facing the Lethal Weapon tonight on Raw. Steve also said he's going to force Shamrock to leave WWF for good following the Lions Den match at SummerSlam. He feels a little tickle after taking a gut-wrench powerbomb from Test. Shane McMahon shows up and this allows Steve to perform the mud kick, and Shane then hands Steve a kendo stick as the referee calls for the bell. Not only does Test get wrecked, but so does Ken Shamrock. Kenny Boy did pretty well at first after running down to help out Test, but Blackman reminds Ken just who he's in the ring with, and we get to see Blackman and Shane team up to create this weird but highly effective corporate ass-kicking machine as they destroy their enemies in the middle of the ring. After this incredible beatdown, Michael Cole gets a word with Steve Austin. Everyone in the arena is on Stone Cold's hit list tonight following that Cinderblock attack last week, and as for SummerSlam, Austin doesn't really care who his opponent's going to be as long as he's got someone to whip at the pay-per-view, though he does suspect it would take him a lot less time to beat Chyna as opposed to Triple H. On Nitro, Disco Inferno says he's a bona fide booty-shaking badass and he has no interest in joining the Filthy Animals. He says the faction have been calling him all week, but Disco will reach out to Kidman and company if and when he wants to be part of the group. He then says he's both the present and future of pro wrestling. Out of all the young guys in the back, he's the one that stands out the most. So Chris Benoit comes out and he tells Disco to get in the ring for a fight. Disco won't be climbing the ladder of success tonight, but he can certainly try to defy the odds and win the US Championship. Disco agreed to the match, and as expected, he didn't defy any odds whatsoever. He did manage to get his moves in, and the match was quite competitive. So competitive that Tony Schiavone summoned his inner Dave Meltzer to give this one a 4-star rating, but Chris won after a diving headbutt, and Chris said this is only the beginning of the revolution. I thought the Filthy Animals were going to somehow play a role in this match, but the boys were nowhere to be found. We've got the Acolytes versus X-Pac and Kane on Raw. On Nitro, Goldberg squashes Barry Windham. Yeah, I'm pretty much done with these matches on Raw at this point. Nothing against the men in the ring, but we've seen these four getting paired up a few times now, and I also find this post-ministry version of the Acolytes a bit boring. Hard-hitting for sure, but the quicker we get to the APA, the better. Undertaker and Show appeared at the stage to watch the match unfold. Apparently Big Show didn't have enough gas to make it from the locker room to the stage, seeing as Undertaker only gave him half a tank. And to be fair, the fans in the audience did get into this match and they made a ton of noise from start to end. Also credit to the competitors as they changed it up a bit here and it wasn't all about X-Pac getting singled out. Still, it does end with Kane getting the final tag of the match. The Big Red Machine cleans house and we see a Bronco Buster from X-Pac. Kane then delivers a chokeslam to Bradshaw for the pinfall win, and that means Kane and X-Pac are going to face The Undertaker and Big Show at Summerslam this week. The Acolytes deliver a beatdown after the match, and of course Undertaker and Show don't try to stop them, but the champs do get a chance to celebrate after the replays, and gotta say, X-Pac and Kane are one of the most popular things WWF has going for it right now. When I said Goldberg vs Windham was a squash, I wasn't joking. Kendall gets slammed first before Bobby Duncombe Jr. gets speared out of his cowboy boots. Barry Windham then comes in to take a spear and our match ends with a jackhammer from Bill Goldberg. The crowd loved it, it's what Goldberg does best. The question is though, what's next for Goldberg and will he get involved in something a bit more meaningful now that he's done with Rick Steiner? Davey Boy Smith is coming back to the WWF. The Chinlock Master, a Reliving the War original. He's coming back to the company after requesting his release following the Montreal incident. Much has been said about the timing of this return, what with Owen's passing and everything that's happened between the McMahons and the Hart family. But nonetheless, the British Bulldog's back and he's been saving up a lot of rest holds since we last seen him in WCW. Hardcore Holly cuts a promo next on Raw, while over on Nitro we've got the NWO versus Harlem Heat. Bombastic Bob says the WWF have backed him into a corner and that's something he doesn't like. I've no idea what he's talking about here, but the company have left Holly no choice and the Big Shot's got himself some backup. Another super heavyweight that's going to help Bob run roughshod all over WWF. Bob introduces his new muscle and it's his cousin Crash Holly. It's like a mini version of Hardcore Holly. Michael Lockwood's been wrestling since 1989 and he also wrestled as the Green Ghost on the WWF Super Astros TV show, but he's been repackaged as Bob's little cousin and he immediately steps over the line by playfully smacking Bob on the face and calling him kid. Holly says he'll beat Crash up just like he beats everyone else up, and when Crash tells Bob not to start something he can't finish, the two begin fighting and they don't stop fighting. They brawl in the ring, they brawl through the audience, they end up fighting on top of a WWF truck where Crash takes a big old suplex. Right from the get-go, the Holly cousins are being portrayed as incredibly dysfunctional, but we'll see where this relationship goes over the next few weeks and months. It still unnecessarily bothers me that Harlem Heat aren't in matching ring gear, but it bothers me even more that the NWO thought it was a good idea to remove a team member earlier on when they've never been so weak as a faction. On the plus side though, Stevie Ray's developed some amazing facial expressions, so we do have a little balance, thankfully. Bobby Heenan says the NWO need this win badly, but Stevie Ray isn't going to make it easy. Stevie gets the better of Vincent and Scott Norton before Booker T comes in for a double back elbow, and it's Horse who gains the NWO a slight advantage before quickly losing it again following an axe kick and Harlem's sidekick from Booker T. Stevie Ray comes back in, and an attack from Norton gives the NWO their last chance to make something happen here. The squad do well to keep Stevie away from his corner. Just when you think Norton's about to win the match, Big Brian Adams runs down to attack his old teammates, and comically, Nick Patrick doesn't call for the bell. Instead, he lets Brian destroy the NWO, and Harlem Heat win following a Booker T missile dropkick. It looks like, after all said and done, it could be Harlem Heat who finally put the nail in the NWO's coffin. Mankind takes on Chyna next on WWF Raw's War. On Nitro, Rick Steiner takes on complete tit Brian Knobbs. Remember when Brian Knobbs came back and they were giving him a small push? Yeah, I'm sure he saw his name on tonight's format and realised that that push was truly over. Rick Steiner got wrecked by Goldberg at Road Wild, but there's no way he wasn't going to beat Knobbs here. It goes to the outside where Brian gets a dog collar wrapped around his face. We see multiple Steiner lines in the ring. Brian Knobbs takes way too much time coming off the top rope and he gets a boot to the chin. And Jimmy Hart ends up accidentally hitting his man with Rick's dog collar. The Steiner Bulldog puts Brian away, and as hard hitting as Rick is, I think I'm ready to see his brother Scott back. Mankind says he's above hitting a woman in the mouth, but he's not above sticking a sock down that same mouth. He tells Chyna to bring her ovaries, and Mankind's gonna bring his guys, and we'll see who the #1 contender really is. As the match begins, we see Triple H being restrained backstage. Just like earlier on, Chyna shows no mercy at the opening bell, and Mick messes up by showing compassion and a little hesitation. He takes a forearm to the face followed by 2 low blows and a DDT, and at this point Triple H has almost made it to the curtain. Chyna's doing a good job of keeping Mick down even if she is cheating. She delivers a big body slam and she almost has the match won, but then Triple H makes it to the stage and Chyna gets distracted. This allows Mick to apply the mandible claw and Chyna loses the match via pinfall. Mankind's now main event in SummerSlam, and what in the name of WCW's going on here? Triple H runs down and both he and Chyna do a number on Mick. I guess they're all good now, seeing as neither person's going to SummerSlam as it currently stands. Shawn Michaels runs down to try and get a little order, and he takes a lot of pleasure announcing that Mankind is now officially the #1 contender for the WWF title. If this couldn't get any more messed up, Shane McMahon makes an appearance and he just goes ahead and announces another #1 contender match for tonight's main event. It's Triple H versus Mankind. And for some reason, Chyna's absolutely okay with this. Like, her hopes and dreams of becoming WWF champion have been taken away from her, and she's absolutely fine. Shane says he's going to referee this upcoming match, while Commissioner Michael says he's completely okay with this, but it's going to be a Falls Count Anywhere match. HBK's also going to serve as a second referee, so Shane can't try any funny business. When you see the first weekly edition of SmackDown next week, and when you see what happens in the main event, you'll quickly notice that this whole thing makes even less sense, but there was also some serious backstage politicking going on here. I'll talk about all that in next week's Reliving the War. BA Billy Gunn talks about his massage last week, while WCW presents Bam Bam Bigelow versus Perry Saturn. So it's the Jersey Triad versus Revolution on Monday Nitro. Bigelow starts off as the aggressor, but it doesn't take long for the match to spill to the outside, where Saturn gets a chance to pull off an Asai moonsault. Seriously, we all know how good Saturn was, but even still, it feels like he's so underrated. Back in the ring, Bigelow breaks his ass when trying to counter a sunset flip. He recovers quickly though and he launches Perry off the top rope. Saturn goes down again after a kick to the chest, and Bigelow prepares for the WWF return of the British Bulldog with a good old-fashioned chinlock. Saturn gets up only to take a drop kick right to the dick. The big man then uses his weight advantage to stop a back suplex. We then see a referee bump and Saturn finally builds some offense after a springboard crossbody and a T-bone suplex, but Chris Kanyon shows up to push Saturn off the top rope. Just when you think Perry's done for, Shane Douglas runs down and he shoves Kenyon into Saturn. This leads to Perry pinning Bigelow, and Saturn wins the Nitro semi-main event. And we really have no movement in this feud, seeing as once again we have another faction in the mix, with Kidman having issues with Diamond Dallas Page. On Raw, Billy Gunn says he had an allergic reaction to the herbs that were rubbed into his ass last week. Still though, Billy is going to show up at SummerSlam and he is going to face The Rock, and The Rock shows up to tell BA exactly what's going to happen at the pay-per-view. First, Billy's going to get diarrhea. Rock's going to make his entrance as the fans stand up and cheer for the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. And finally, Rock's then going to lay off the smacketh down on Billy Gunn. Rock brings the masseuse out from last week. He reveals that she used the People's Poison Ivy on Billy's bumhole. Rock then asks this young lady if she likes pancakes before confirming she's from Chicago, and
Well, The Rock says, why don't you just pancake your ass back to Chicago?
Rock says he could walk down the People's Ramp right now, he could hand his glasses to some jabroni, he could also embarrass that jabroni on national television.
How you doing? It doesn't matter how you're doing!
Rock could enter the People's Ring, and Rock could check Billy Gunn into the SmackDown hotel. Billy and Rock throw down, and Rock gets the better of his upcoming SummerSlam opponent. When the action spills to the outside though, Billy turns it around and The Rock gets taken out with a kendo stick. A shot to the head back inside the ring knocks The Rock out cold, and it's Rock who ends up getting embarrassed when Billy shoves Rock's face into his rash-infested ass. Backstage, The Rock says he will get payback in 6 short days. Rock plans on laying the smackdown on Billy, but there's now going to be a stipulation. Rock versus Billy Gunn at SummerSlam is now officially a kiss my ass match. Triple H battles Mick Foley for a spot in the SummerSlam main event. On Nitro, Sid Vicious gets a title shot against Hulk Hogan. The crowd goes crazy once again for Hogan, but Sid doesn't care too much. Hulk takes a ton of kicks and he spends the first portion of the match laid out on the canvas, and the big man even takes a page out of Hogan's playbook with a big leg drop. Sid forgot though that the red and yellow Hulk Hogan is an absolute master of no selling, and Hogan gets to his feet while the crowd lose their collective mind. Sid takes a few shots followed by a big wind-up punch, and he ends up on the outside where he takes a short break. Sid says he's got a big brain and he's using that big brain right now to play mind games with Hogan, but I don't know dude, I think he just wants to go home. The match continues with Sid in control with boring offense, punches, kicks, axe handles. Hogan doesn't do much better with his turnbuckle shots followed by a foot choke, and we then go to the outside where the men trade eye rakes and Hogan ends up hitting Sid with a chair, not enough to warrant a DQ apparently. Sid gets a little payback moments later, so turnabout's fair play, I guess. We then go to the commentary desk where Sid throws a drink over Schiavone, so Schiavone throws one right back. The sneaky little shit only did this when Sid turned his back though. We go back to the ring where the match gets a 5-star Wrestling Bios rating thanks to this destructive nerve pinch right here, and this one stays in for a very long time folks. Hulk fights out, he gets put down again with a clothesline. Sid then gets Hulk up for a chokeslam and that should be it all over. But Sid wastes way too much time trash talking and it's now time to Hulk up brothers. Punches, big boot, big leg drop, Hogan goes for the cover and Rick Steiner interferes in the match. Did I miss the part where this was announced as an ODQ match? The ring fills up with all sorts of garbage as Sting runs down for the save. Sid gets taken out, and check this out. Rick Steiner takes the big boot and the big leg drop, and Hogan pins Rick Steiner to win this match. This match that was against Sid Vicious. I know they're trying to keep Sid's supposed win streak intact, but it's still insanely stupid, and God knows how much glue was being huffed when they came up with this finish. Absolutely dreadful. We've got Steve Austin providing commentary for this Raw main event, and we've also got our 2 referees getting full entrances before the competitors. We start with both men brawling in the corner and things get pretty violent between Mick and Triple H before we go to the outside. Shane and Sean are pushing each other around like school kids as Mick chokes Hunter out with some TV cable. We then go to the ramp where Hunter takes a backdrop, and both referees go down for the count, but Triple H kicks out at 2. Steve Austin still wants to know who it was who dropped a cinder block on his head last week, and JR thinks it was Triple H. Chyna then makes an appearance to give Hunter an assist, and there's nothing the referees can do about it. We eventually make our way back to ringside where Mick takes a bump at the steel steps, and back in the ring Triple H begins focusing on Mick's surgically repaired knee. The referees continue to argue as Triple H remains laser focused on the injured body part. We see a figure 4 leg lock from Triple H, and when Mick makes it to the ropes, he sets himself up for a chokehold from Chyna. From here, we go into the audience where Mick ends up getting the better of Triple H. But when the two return to ringside, Hunter takes control once again, and then he grabs a steel chair. Our match ends with the referees fighting over that steel chair while Mick plants Hunter with his double arm DDT. Mick then applies the mandible claw while Shawn and Shane continue their argument, and Triple H then delivers a back suplex onto the steel chair. Both men's shoulders are down, the referees make the 3 count, and both men's arms get raised in victory. There's a lot of confusion over who just won the match. Shane says Triple H, while Shawn Michaels says Mankind won. Steve Austin seems eager to hear the end result, so it's announced that both men won the match, and therefore both men are #1 contenders. At SummerSlam, it's going to be a triple threat match, Mick Foley versus Triple H versus Stone Cold, and Austin responds to this announcement by punching Shane McMahon before walking off. Triple H and Mankind begin brawling in the ring, and a bunch of officials run down to break up the fight. Raw ends with Mankind and Hunter pulling off their finishing moves just before the show fades to black. We can't call out WCW for their illogical shows without also calling out the WWF. Personally, I thought this episode of Raw was extremely messy, and it all brings us to a main event match at SummerSlam where the champion takes a back seat thanks to the chaotic nature of the build-up. It felt like plans were rapidly changing backstage, and this resulted in split-second decisions on TV. Fans thought something was going to happen only for it to get changed again. And you know, I love Mick Foley, but I really don't think he should have been involved in the title picture, seeing as he only returned after being away for a few months. If this was a certain WCW main eventer, then we'd all be laughing about it. With this in mind, and again, to be fair, I'm still giving the point to Raw, and that's because Nitro was just plain bad this week. The first hour of Nitro was pissed away for the sake of a weak main event match, and it's a typical case of the young guys getting brushed aside for the sake of WCW's big boys. Both shows weren't good this week, but if I had to choose one, I'd go with Raw. And that means Raw's now on 104 points, Nitro's got 73, and we've got 20 ties on the board. Raw got a 6.6 in the television ratings, while Nitro scored a 3.3. SummerSlam 99 is the next pay-per-view in the Reliving the War timeline, so make sure you come over and we'll see everything that happened in Minneapolis. Al Snow takes on the Big Boss Man in a hardcore match. Steve Blackman looks to rid the WWF of Ken Shamrock forever inside the Lion's Den. Test takes on Shane McMahon in a Greenwich Street fight, and we'll also see if it really is Triple H's time when he faces Mankind and Stone Cold Steve Austin in a triple threat main event match. The following Sunday, we'll check out SmackDown following the usual Thursday episode of Reliving the War. And as mentioned earlier, if you don't want to wait, hop over to my Patreon page to see the uploads early. By the time this episode of Reliving the War hits YouTube, both SummerSlam and episode 198 will be available for early access. Thanks for watching everyone, I do appreciate it. And please take care.